Okay, I'm going to give it 1 more minute. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll get started very shortly. Bienvenue tout le monde. On va commencer dans environ 30 à 40 secondes. Merci de votre patience. OK. Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the United for Literacy National Forum on the AI Revolution and Literacy, Threats or Opportunities. So thank you so much for joining us. Merci beaucoup de vous joindre à nous. What a great turnout. We have over 200 people that have logged in already. We had over 600 people registering. Let's see how many people joined today. So mon nom est Mélanie Valsin. My name is Mélanie Valsin. I am the CEO of United for Literacy, formerly known as Frontier College. Let me start by saying that I come to you from Tiondiaga, Montreal, the unceded lands of the Ganyendiaga Nation. Ganyendiaga is known as the gathering place for many First Nations, and we recognize the Ganyendiaga as custodians of the lands and waters from which I come to you today. United for Literacy is a national charitable organization. We offer free tutoring and mentoring to adults, youth, and children who need extra support to succeed in mainstream school, in the school system, in the workplace, or in life in general. With more than a century of frontline experience to draw on, we're actually celebrating our 125th anniversary next year. We bring a lot of experience to the literacy field. So we bring deep expertise supported by extraordinary volunteers and collaborations. We work in partnership with over 400 organizations across the country. We're trying to bridge the literacy gap here. So we see the impact of our collective work every day in the lives of the tens of thousands of people who we empower by helping them gaining the literacy skills they need to succeed and reach their goals and basically explore their full potential. So we're very proud to host today's forum to explore artificial intelligence and how it impacts the way that we work and that we live, basically. As you must know, literacy touches virtually every aspect of our lives and has great influence on our well-being. Moreover, studies have shown that literacy is a powerful predictor of life success. Literacy upgrading has really positive impacts on employment, on health, on housing, and on civic engagement. It's one of the best tools that we have to provide equal access to opportunity to all Canadians. But in the past few years, buzzwords such as, ChatGPT, have we heard that since November, like so much? So buzzwords such as ChatGPT, chatbots, virtual assistants have started to be commonly used in our daily lives and in our vocabulary. So we want to explore today what this all means and how do all these new technologies actually impact us, either positively or negatively. So as AI becomes more and more common in schools and in the workplace, Canadians really must develop strong digital literacy skills to keep up with, the demands of their academic careers, or their employment, or the demands of the workplace, basically. So today we will learn a little bit about the components of AI and its role in education and in the workplace or in the business sector. We will also explore how we can equip people with the knowledge and skills that they need to understand, use, and interact with AI responsibly, ethically, and effectively. We'll also ask a few questions to ChatGPT. Yeah, we've invited ChatGPT to join us today. We wanted to test what kind of answers it would provide to some of our questions. In doing so, though, we will use the Government of Canada's guiding principles pertaining to the effective and ethical use of AI. These are understanding and measuring the impact of using AI by developing and sharing tools and approaches, being transparent, providing meaningful explanations, and being as open as we can. Oh, and also provide efficient or sufficient training. So if you'd like to learn more about the responsible use of artificial intelligence guidelines that are provided by the Government of Canada, you can have a look in the chat. I think Jen, my colleague, will put the link in the chat right now. So I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Edelman Canada and the McConnell Foundation for their support for today's event. We couldn't have done this event without you. Thank you very much. Before we get started, we're soon getting started, don't worry. I need to do a few, I need to give you a few housekeeping notes. So, the panelists will be speaking in English. Les panélistes vont s'exprimer en anglais. So if you'd like to listen to the webinar or to this forum in French, please click on the bottom at the bottom right of your screen. It says interpretation, and then you can click on French. Alors, si vous voulez suivre la conférence en français, s'il vous plaît, rendez-vous en bas de votre écran. Ça dit interprétation. On clique sur interprétation et ensuite on clique sur French ou français. Et finalement, s'il vous plaît, cliquez sur Mute Original Audio pour que vous n'entendiez plus l'anglais. Ça vous va? J'espère que oui. As we have live translation today, as I was just saying, we will all do our best to slow down. Oh, I should take that advice right now as we discuss, so we can let the translators do a great job. I also wanted to let you know that following the panel discussion, we will open it up for Q&As, so for a question and answer period. Everyone today in the audience has been muted, so if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you have general comments or, again, questions, please use the chat, and we're trying to keep this very interactive. So don't hesitate to put any questions or comments in the chat. And if you have questions that you'd like to send us by email, you can do so at literacy@unitedforliteracy.ca. Can someone put that in the chat for me, please? When the forum will be finished at 2:30, we will be hosting breakout sessions with each of the panelists. So if you'd like to continue the discussion with one of the specific panelists, or if there's one topic that you were very interested in and you'd like to go deeper in, you'll be able to join our panelists in a different, they will each have their breakout rooms. In order to join those sessions, though, you'll have to log out of this Zoom session and then join another session with your panelists. So we will put all the links to the breakout rooms in the chat close to the end of this conference. And then you also received them by email this morning in your reminder email. So you'll be able to click on, to go back to your email and click on the link that you want to select. We should be done those breakout rooms at like 3:15. In the breakout rooms, just one last thing, we will have a Francophone staff. I will be one of them, a Francophone staff that will be able to help you with translation. So if you have a question that you want to ask in French or you're asking for interpretation of what's just been said in English, don't hesitate to raise your hand. We'll be helping out them. The forum is being recorded, but not the breakout sessions. And when we're done with the forum, we will be posting the recording on our website, and also it'll be sent out to you by email, so you'll be able to share it with everyone you know and all your networks. Now, I think that's enough. I think we're ready to start, right? So I would like to extend a warm welcome to someone that I truly and deeply admire, our host, Martine Saint-Victor. Martine is a communication strategist, and she's the general manager at Edelman in Montreal. Edelman is one of, so the Montreal office of Edelman is one of 60 Edelman offices across the globe, making it the most important communications firms in the world. Wow. Martine is also a monthly columnist for the Montreal Gazette and for La Presse, and we see her regularly as a collaborator at Radio-Canada, television and radio. So thank you so much, Martine, for hosting this forum. And everyone, please join me in welcoming Martine Saint-Victor. Merci de vous joindre à moi pour accueillir Martine.
Thank you so much, Mélanie. Merci beaucoup pour cet accueil chaleureux. Hello to everyone. It's really an honor for me to be part of this event today. Je suis vraiment très heureuse de participer à ce webinaire aujourd'hui, surtout que le sujet me tient à cœur. The topic for me is extremely important. I think for many of us, AI may seem sometimes scary because we don't understand all of what it means, but it is a revolution. And so I'm sure, like me, you want to make sure everybody is included in this revolution, hence the importance of the topic today. So every year, United for Literacy has, an event with esteemed panelists who are leaders, experts in their respected fields. This event is no exception. We're particularly excited about the panelists today. So please bear with me as I introduce them. They're very impressive with long descriptions, but it's worth it. So first we have Valentine Godard. Valentine is a member of the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council of Canada. She's a UN expert on AI policy and governance. Valentine is also an attorney, a certified mediator, and an inter-arts professional. She is the founder and executive director of AI Impact Alliance, which is an independent nonprofit organization whose mission is to facilitate a responsible implementation of AI and also to accelerate achievement of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's a mouthful. Valentine, hello, it's nice to see you. Next, we have Matthew Johnson. Matthew is the Director of Education for Media Smarts, which is Canada's Centre for Digital and Media Literacy. He is the author of many of Media Smart's lessons, parent materials, and interactive resources. Matthew is also lead on Media Smart's Young Canadians in a Wireless World research project. Hello, Matthew. Rukia Khan. Rukia is a social support assistant at Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities. In the early 2000s, she came to Canada from Pakistan. In 2018, she attended United for Literacy, where she studied English and computer programs. Hello.
Hello.
Ocean Poro-Shiwak. Ocean is from Rigolet Nusiarut, and she is currently studying aesthetics at Academy Canada. She has been working with United for Literacy for 3 years as a community literacy worker and as a camp counselor. Hello, Ocean. Nice to see you. Yuanda Zhang. Yuanda is a community coordinator with United for Literacy. He has delivered programs supporting vulnerable populations with literacy and technology skills for the past 6 years. Nice to see you, Yuanda. Very nice. So thank you, Valentine, Matthew, Rukia, Ocean, and Yuanda. We're excited to have you with us today and to hear from you, to get your insights. Now, let's dive into the topic at hand. You've all received by email the very insightful discussion paper entitled The Artificial Intelligence Revolution and Literacy, Opportunity or Threat. And so from it, if you allow me a little personal take, I am most interested in how we break down the education inequities. And I want to make sure, what scares me about AI is, will it deepen the divide? So this is why I'm looking to the panelists to kind of put all of this in perspective and hold my hand, and those of our participants to take us through that. But before, and Melanie alluded to it before, teased us with this, we're going to make a ChatGPT test in real time and ask it a few questions. So Mark from United for Literacy is going to be behind the operation. And the first question we want to ask ChatGPT is, can you provide examples of successful AI-driven literacy programs or projects from Canada in 50 words or less? Not bad. So now ChatGPT has suggested one program by Nelson Education called Amplify Reading, and the other one published by Orca Book, Read to Me. So that was pretty quick. I don't know what's the time and how long it took to get those results, but pretty impressive. So Mark, if you don't mind, we're going to move to a second question to ChatGPT. How can we make sure that AI-powered reading programs in Canada don't make the gap between people who have access to technology and those who don't have access to it? So we should prioritize equity, inclusivity, training, and outreach. And I know we're going to wait for questions at the end, but somebody in the chat said, yes, it was fast, but is it accurate? So I'm hoping one of our panelists can address that, that very precise and important question. And I think at the heart of why many question AI and its role today in our society. So I want to hear from the panelists specifically about what's scary and what's scary about AI, but also what we need to be hopeful about and how AI can be used for good in literacy. I'll start with you, Yuanda. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there's some good news and there's some bad news, right? The bad news is probably that, yes, I believe it will deepen the divide in quite a bit because AI is just such a powerful tool. And like many of these technologies, it's a great multiplier on your ability to be productive, right? So if you work with AI as a creative person, right? So if you work in marketing, if you make materials, you can produce 10 to 20 times as much material as you would before you had AI. Right, so it's so powerful, and the ability to have access to AI will make a big difference for people. The good news, though, I think, is that something that we've found with the large language models is a type of computing that we haven't had in pretty much the entire generation, which is this is a type of technology that you can interact with through natural language, right? So previously, other tools, let's say like Excel is a popular tool, programming on languages like Python or JavaScript, building websites. Those are all technologies that were extremely powerful, but really difficult to access for people who can't pick up a certain set of technical skills and engage in years and years of training. But this technology, it's natural language, which means you can just speak to it, right? And so you can talk to it in a conversation like a human being. It's not even like Google where you have to craft your query very precisely. However, it also means that it makes literacy all the more important because the prompt that you give to the AI is so short and so brief that you have to be very specific and very articulate in asking the AI exactly what you want. And so being literally not just literate, but literate on a level where you can be very articulate about your thoughts and what you're asking for, and redirecting the AI in a direction that gets it closer to what you're looking for is becoming more and more important as we go. And that makes basic literacy an even more critical thing as we go forward. So that's where I would land on it, is if literacy was important before, it's going to be so much more important now.
Thank you. And Matthew, I'd love to hear you on that, but also I'd like to hear you about accuracy, because I think this is something that preoccupies many of us.
And it's a complicated question because a lot of the questions about accuracy may be different between different models, between different tools. I understand that there are big differences between different iterations, so between ChatGPT 3.5 and ChatGPT 4. And a lot of the times when we have accuracy issues with the output from AI, from large language models, it's not necessarily that the facts are inaccurate, although you do sometimes get what are called hallucinations, where it'll simply make up things. But what happens more often is that it'll be either in the details. So for instance, if you ask ChatGPT to a certain question and give scholarly references, it'll usually answer the question pretty accurately. But the scholarly references either will be wrong or non-existent. It'll refer to articles with the wrong authors, or articles that don't exist, or articles that aren't about the topic. And the other way that it's frequently inaccurate is that it emphasizes the wrong things. And that's probably the trickiest form of inaccuracy, because you really only notice it if you're already an expert in the topic. And so, for instance, if you ask ChatGPT to talk about people's understanding of the shape of the world, it won't tell you that the world is flat, but it will tell you fairly often that people in the Middle Ages thought the world was flat, which is not actually true, but many people believe that it is true. And all of that comes down to the fact that it is essentially a very, very sophisticated form of autocomplete. And that's true of all of these, in that they are looking for patterns, like all machine learning algorithms do. They look for patterns in the data set that they were trained on. And as a result, they replicate those patterns. And so when there is a pattern, and we see that, of course, in a lot of the concerns around bias, because if it's trained on a biased data set, then the bias will find its way into the results. But we also find that in terms of misunderstandings or misconceptions, or issues of emphasis, or issues of context. So all that being said, I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for AI and generative AI in particular to be of value in promoting literacy, and in particular in helping people who have either limited French or English or limited literacy skills. Because one of the things that they are very good at is taking content that you give them and formatting it into a particular format. And for the very same reasons that they're not that great at those more complicated fact questions, you can, for instance, say, here is my experience, here is the job I want to apply for, write a cover letter that explains how my experience makes me suitable for this job. That's something that's a very specialized form of writing that often people who are, working in a second language, or who have limited literacy skills in general, have a lot of difficulty with. But something like ChatGPT does it very easily. And so I think our challenge is finding ways that we can connect the people who need these tools to these ways of using them, while limiting the risks inherent in the widespread adoption of the machine learning algorithms and AI.
And Matthew, you used the term generative AI. Quick definition, please.
So, well, generative AI, broadly speaking, is AI that's used to create content. So an example would be ChatGPT, where it creates text. DALL-E or Midjourney are examples where they create images. But essentially, it's one where you're asking it to come up with something new.
Perfect, thank you. Ocean, what's your take? What should we be fearful of, and what should we look forward to in AI in this space?
I definitely think that we should be wary of just how much data they are taking and analyzing. But I definitely think that it is an opportunity for ideas and opinions to be extrapolated, and in a way that maybe we might not be able to think of per se.
Thank you. That's a good perspective. I didn't look at it that way. I love that. Rukia, what about you? What scares you about this revolution, but also what are you looking forward to with all these new tools?
So as you guys know, English is my second language. So far I find like AI is very helpful. My only fear is if we have less literacy skills, then when you type something and let's say ChatGPT give you the answer, right? if you don't carefully read anything, then it's hard for you, right? So it's always better to have some skills to read and write before you can go to any AL or AI site, or let's say use GPT. That's my experience. But so far, I have a very good experience with ChatGPT and AI.
So you're saying that it's helpful to you to acquire, to augment, if you will, your skills in English. It has been.
Yes. I can give you an example. Let's say if I know like you guys teach me a lot how to write emails, how to do better, but sometimes I can just copy and paste to ChatGPT and I say, can you please correct for me? And then they can format for me, let's say a past tense. So I said, oh yeah, they are doing very good. But sometimes they give me totally opposite answer. Then I have to correct myself to ask, as you understand, like they are talking as a human, right? So then I can get my right answer. Yeah.
That's good. That's the accuracy we were referring to before. Valentine, I'm asking you the same question, which is what should we be looking out for, but also what should we be excited? And because you're a lawyer, I'm going to add to the question, how do we integrate AI particularly in an academic setting, ethically and meaningfully?
Okay, thank you for the question and for the little add-on. I just to be sure, we're defining academic as all forms of learning, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good. My hopes in 2017 around artificial intelligence led me to call the government. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather for everybody who's assisting. Terribly sorry. Led me to found a conference called AI and a Social Mission and a nonprofit organization called AI Impact Alliance. The idea behind the mission behind AI Impact Alliance was, as you can see in the illustration behind me, and I hope the translators can hear me properly. You can give me a little thumbs up, Louise, if we're good. The goal behind AI Impact Alliance was to make sure that, was to make sure that everybody could have a hand at the helm of AI, that we could steer it together towards sustainable development goals, reconciliation, human rights, and avoid the risks of AI, which were already clearly stated by a number of experts back in 2017, which are AI does risk increasing social inequalities, existing racism, and colonialism, whether it be in economic models, and so on. That goal was met with a lot of pushback from industry. Industry works closely with the government. So we need to think about how we work together.
Valentine, hold on a second. What do you mean by industry? Can you specify a little bit?
Yes, I'm going to define. So when I talk in terms of sectors, there's the civil sector, there's the private sector, and there's the public sector. In the public sector, I see government arm's length organizations, art councils, and so on. In the private sector, there is industry, for-profit industry. There's two business models, for-profit and non-profit. So I'm really putting in that very broad category, all industry. However, probably more specifically in this case, because we're talking about AI, on tech industry. And in the civil sector, we have civil society organizations, which generally speaking are nonprofit organizations, community-based, community-led initiatives, as well as social entrepreneurs. Social entrepreneurs are the exception because sometimes there is a for-profit business model, but their mission comes first in how they use artificial intelligence. So how we did that at AI Impact Alliance was make sure that our membership is first and above open to civil society organizations that strive for SDGs, reconciliation and human rights, and in this day and age, democracy. So these organizations are the only organizations that can be accepted and can have the right to vote on policy recommendations. I had to put the membership on pause many years ago because I was mostly getting contacted by businesses, small businesses who had honestly very dodgy potential uses of artificial intelligence. So when I say that my hope around AI was met by a certain pushback, is that the first call I did to government when millions and millions and billions were announced investment in AI was to be told, we are investing, anybody can apply for some of this funding except nonprofits. And that to me was a bit of a shocker coming from the Canadian government, because I thought, if we're not going to invest without expecting, because basically the reason I was given is we have to have a return on investment. If we're going to invest into access to AI and the use of AI, we need to have a return on investment because we have taxpayers to answer to. That's a very deep structural problem. So when ChatGPT says, how do we avoid AI increasing social inequalities, and it answers equity, outreach, and inclusion, I don't think a ChatGPT will ever give me a systemic answer as to how we can change investment policies in AI to make sure that nonprofit, mission purposed first organizations can get, still today in 2023, more funding, more access to either their capacity to collect, own their own data, develop have intellectual property on the AI systems that they build for their communities and their social purposes. So my hope has slowly disintegrated. If I do still have a little bit of a hope in terms of where AI is headed, is regulation. Regulation will help us steer AI in at least avoiding the major risks. But we can talk maybe a little bit later on about Bill C-27, which is the current proposed Canadian regulation on artificial intelligence.
But if I hear you correctly, from 2017 to 6 years later, you don't find that we've made much progress except for legislation. But as far as usage and understanding, is that what you're saying? That we're not really going in the right direction?
The civil society, the civil sector, so nonprofit, community-led organizations, still under-resourced. And I include in there the arts and cultural sector, which recently had to react with low resources, low human resources, very recently put together AI committees to answer government, to be able to have an impact on the code of conduct that was published by ICED. So I put that in the chat a little bit earlier, so everybody can have a look. And in Quebec, there was a consultation also led by Innovation Québec. Conseil de l'Innovation du Québec is an organization mandated by the government whose mission is AI adoption. There were maybe 2 people representing the arts and cultural sector in that consultation. Ministry of Culture also called for like 1 week turnaround in these low resourced organizations. That means that we don't have enough access to understanding what the implications are. When consultations come on emerging regulations, we're not sure what to answer. When I say we, I'm putting myself in that sector because I'm part of civil society organizations and the arts and cultural organization sector as well. So there needs to be more capacity building, both on the understanding of what the implications are, and as well as then we go into the nitty-gritty. Capacity to collect data requires technology that collects data. We need that capacity to own our own data. We'll refer to the Indigenous AI protocol that Jason Lewis and other authors published a couple of years back, which refers to data sovereignty. And that is an important, very important factor to consider in that capacity. So the civil society organizations are still in the three pillars of a democratic system, of a capitalist democratic system, the poor, weak sector in terms of both AI understanding and AI adoption. And it's not because people are scared. Sometimes people say, oh, they're scared of adopting. That's not the problem. We're going to end up being users of technology where data is collected on what we say, what we do, what we look like, our image. Data will be collected on the users. We won't be the builders of AI systems. And that's a problem.
Yeah, thank you, Valentine. And you mentioned arts and culture. I think we all saw the news out of Hollywood and the writer's strike, and the most complicated part of the negotiation was AI. So it's not only the collection of data, it's, as you said, what are we producing? What are we being protected from? And even here in Canada, we saw the Junos and take a stand, and in the US in the music industry, the Grammys. So certainly this is an industry that is kind of leading the charge in protection of the protection of rights of humans, which is reassuring in many ways. But to get back to how we can integrate AI into academic curriculums ethically and meaningfully, I'd love to hear Yaounda what you think, and Matthew next.
So I want to address a few points that came up kind of just in the discussion, and those are some really great points, Valentine. Thank you. So the first one that you kind of brought up is there seems to be a skew in funding towards for-profit businesses, which seems like very strange for a government to engage in, right? And I would be curious as to why that is, but I would also speculate as to where they're going with that, which is very often in new industries, what happens is it would be the for-profit sector that kind of spearheads the technology, right? And so you can think about like the internet, telecommunications, all of these sectors. The for-profit sector kind of drove ahead, created innovations, moved very fast, and they had access to things that not-for-profit might not have access to. And great prosperity was created by the for-profit sector. But also in the process of creating that prosperity, you also create great inequality, right? And it tends to be the case that after the prosperity is created and all of these things are put into use, that we start to then look at the inequality and redistribution of the resources. So I guess like I would speculate there that some people may be thinking that first we should push ahead and then we should redistribute afterwards. That would be my general thought there. Whether that's the best method, I mean, I'm not sure, but I can see maybe that might be part of the thought process. In regards to the writer's strike and writing, I think this is actually a really interesting topic because the way that AI actually generates material and work and writing is that it has to be trained on the writing from other people, right? There's a data set of the writing it scrapes the internet, it looks at other things people have written, and then it generates what it generates, right? And so you can't really have a world with only AI generating movie scripts and materials like that, because then what do you train it on? You still need human beings to kind of give it the materials for it to consume. And AI training AI, it kind of gets into like a weird loop where it's just repeating the same thing. So where we're kind of going to move with some of these things, I think, is that eventually people will need to be, and this is something Ocean brought up, which is that folks will need to take sovereignty over their own data. And for AI to be trained on the data that you produce, you should be able to charge a fee or have some type of ownership over that, right? Because that becomes the true commodity, is the body of work that you've kind of produced over your lifetime. So just two general thoughts there. To bring it back to kind of the question you asked, in education, I kind of see it from two main angles. The first one is on the very practical side, engaging folks without access to AI, I think in my experience has been very simple, but not necessarily easy, which is that almost everyone in my classrooms that I work with, and many of these folks have low access and low literacy, the moment you show them AI, they're extremely excited. They're like, what else can I do? Can I ask it more questions? How do I get on this website? How do I sign up? So I don't see the fear that some people mention. All I see really is excitement and curiosity, interest. But really, I think what it is about is just getting it in their hands, right? How can we get as many touch points with these folks and AI as we can? It's almost like Google, right? Google's a tool we've had for a very long time. We can talk about all sorts of problems we have with Google, with misinformation, finding the wrong things. You can't find the right thing properly. You don't know what query to put in, right? All of these eventually are solved by just giving people enough exposure for them to have an intuition about how to Google something, what are the right questions to ask, what are the problems with Google. They can talk about it in their communities, but really it just comes first with putting it in their hands, right? And so what I generally try to do in my classrooms is I just sit with every individual, try and get them set up with ChatGPT, have them play around with it. One mistake I see educators make is a lot of folks are really concerned about people cheating with ChatGPT and having it write people's homework. What I tell my learners is go for it. Write your things with ChatGPT, because in the future, this will be your writing assistant. You'll be writing with this thing beside you, right? It's a little bit like the calculator. The existence of the calculator has not taken away our necessity for knowing math, because you need to know enough math to have intuition about whether the answer out of the calculator is correct. So that's my ultimate answer, is as much exposure as we can. Let's put it in people's hands. Let's bring them in the classrooms. Say cheat, and if you have a good relationship with the person and you're working with them on a one-to-one basis, you will understand whether it's in their own words or not, right? That kind of brings me to the second point about education I want to make, which is that I think AI solves basically what is the largest issue in education, which is the scalability, right? I believe education really works when it's on a one-to-one basis, when there's a real relationship, there's a real mentorship, you get to know the person and you can kind of develop a trajectory for how they progress. For hundreds and hundreds of years, we have not innovated education. We've lived in a world where you just do a one-size-fits-all. There's a classroom of 30 people, you give a lecture, you don't really know where everybody's at. And if you try to keep track, you can't, because you have one teacher and 30 students, right? And the reason you had to do that was a lack of resources. Well, now with AI, the AI can do some elements of giving feedback, the relationship management. And so if you can have, let's say, a personalized AI tutor for every single person, suddenly education becomes monumentally more scalable, right? And so that, I think, is the long-term trajectory, is that we'll be able to kind of solve education in a different way, and we'll be able to have the type of education we believe in here at United for Literacy, which is personal relationships customized to the individual. And yeah, I'm excited to get there. So that's my answer.
Thanks, yeah. And the thing with your example with the calculator, which I love, but I think what parents, for example, will tell you is, my child, 2 + 2, the reflex is going to be to use a calculator. The reflex should be able to not use a calculator and be able to answer 2 + 2. So I think for many educators, not that they don't want AI in classrooms, they just don't want it to be the first resource or the reflex. So I think this is where we need to find a good balance. Matthew, I'd love to hear it, to hear you, sorry.
Yeah, I agree. And I've used the calculator analogy as well. I think it's a good one. And what's important about calculators, and I have 2 children in school right now. One's in grade 7 and one is in grade 10 here in Ontario. And it has been interesting to see how for a long time they weren't allowed to use calculators. Because they had to learn the arithmetic. They had to learn how to do it themselves. And at a certain point, it's expected that you've learned that. And now you're learning more sophisticated math. And so you're allowed to use calculators. And of course, there's a limit to how much you can do with calculators, particularly. So that is very much, I think, what school systems are going to have to adapt to in the same way. When do you bring AI in? When do you allow kids to use it? And in what context? So one of the things that we talk about in our professional development material for teachers about using digital technology more broadly in the classroom is to think about, what are you assessing and evaluating? And that's a really important guide to when you should allow kids to use, or students to use, any kind of technology that does the work for them. Because generally speaking, if it's doing something that is not what you're evaluating, if it's doing something that's not what they need to learn, then it's fine. If you want to use DALL-E to make images to create a poster for a history class. Maybe you've got an assignment in your history class, make a propaganda poster for World War I that the Canadian government might have used to try to get people to enroll in World War I. So you're not being marked on your artwork in that case. You're being marked on your understanding of how the government used propaganda in World War I. You're being all of those other factors. Those things you're going to have to put in there. The DALL-E or Midjourney are not going to give you those. So that's a perfectly legitimate case. But if you're in an art class and the assignment is show me that you can draw a human at the right proportions, well, you're actually being marked on that. That's what you're supposed to learn. And so that's a big part of what we have to prepare educators for. And it's a similar thing when it comes to plagiarism. I mean, plagiarism has been an issue certainly since the earliest days of the internet. And really, it's a little bit more complicated now with things like ChatGPT, but the same issues are there. So basically, there are different kinds of assignments that are easier and harder to plagiarize. If you assign the same essay topic every year, if you assign an essay topic, or if you let kids choose their essay topics. I remember I was a high school teacher for 10 years, and every year, this shows it's a little dated, but every year I would get some student hand in an essay on why marijuana should be legalized. And of course, that was never one of the essay topics they were allowed to do. And so I knew right away, okay, this is not something that they wrote. And similarly, if you suddenly see, well, I've had the student in my class for a couple of months now, and I've not seen writing at this level. Part of the issue, one of the reasons that makes ChatGPT less useful for plagiarism is that it is so fluent. It actually puts words together into sentences and paragraphs extremely well. And so most of the students who are going to use it to plagiarize don't write that well. But more broadly, I think our big challenge as educators is to go beyond teaching kids how to use and when to use AI. Because I absolutely agree, that's not, there's no fear coming from kids about using these tools. My kids, they will happily spend hours playing with ChatGPT and asking it crazy questions. It's fun. It's like asking Siri to beatbox and other games you play with your phone. What is a challenge is helping them to engage critically with the role that algorithms and AI in particular play in our lives. And that comes from things like recommendation algorithms. So when you're on YouTube or TikTok, how does it decide what to recommend or what to show you next? It goes to privacy, because of course it is our data that is powering AI decisions. They are making decisions based on what they think they know about us. Sometimes those are accurate or not. Sometimes those are misleading. Even when they're accurate, they can be unjust. And so we do have to integrate that critical engagement and all of the implications of it, like knowing how to limit data collection, into what we teach to kids, because that is a life skill, because they are going to be affected for their entire lives. Shopping for skateboards today could lead to you paying higher insurance premiums 10 years from now. And because AI, unlike your classic algorithm, because it is self-modifying, because it is constantly changing how it works, even the people who designed it, even the people who operate it, may not be able to explain how it works. And it is interesting to read some of the papers about things like ChatGPT, about large language models, or about image generating algorithms like DALL-E and Midjourney. And so much of what's in this is, well, this is how we think it works, but we're not entirely sure. And this is sometimes coming from the people who designed these tools, because they have so many working parts. Apparently, ChatGPT can consider, when it's deciding what word to put next, it can consider words in 96 dimensions of similarity or difference from the preceding word. And it has up to 13 what are called transformer heads and attention heads. And all of these things interact. And again, it's constantly adjusting itself based on how successful it perceives itself to be. And so these are fundamentally resistant to understanding. They are fundamentally opaque. And it is going to be a real challenge for us as a society, both to teach people how to engage with those, and also, of course, how to regulate those, how to determine whether or not these are discriminatory, whether they are just, whether they are fair, and which uses should be permitted.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. Very enlightening. I want to talk about social justice. And Ocean, I'm going to come to you first. Can you give us some insight as to how groups who are seeking equity, particularly those who have low literacy, for example, and how non-for-profits, for example, can use AI to advocate for social justice?
So, I've been doing a little bit of research on this, and there is a lot happening with this that I found, and one of it includes monitoring the abuse of the Human Rights Act. So AI can analyze people's social media and also use satellite imagery to help gather information about people in organizations, in important decision making, policyholders, stakeholders, to see if they are in any violation of the Human Rights Act, and provide that evidence to these equity seeking groups to take action and hold these people accountable. So adding to this, there is discovering and diminishing discrimination. So algorithms within AI can be used to examine and identify discrimination patterns in areas such as employment, housing, and also the criminal justice system. By doing this, it gives motive to stakeholders and all these big decision makers to take accountability for their actions and create change.
Martin, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was waiting for that. I was waiting for the moment where I was going to be on mute. Thank you, Ocean. I think a lot of what you brought up meets also what Valentine was saying about governance and policy making. How do we, I want to stay with you a little bit, Ocean. How do we make sure that, low literacy or people who are maybe, cast aside when it comes to literacy, unfortunately, how do we make sure that they're not left behind in this AI revolution? Like this is my biggest concern, because I think it was Yawanda who said that, who said that, for sure it was AI is not going to make difference, is not going to make discrepancies less, but rather bigger. But how do we make sure no one is left behind? What can educators do?
I think educators can make not only AI, but education for AI more accessible, so that can either be being able to view it in low internet or no internet connection. That would also include maybe people in this position actually going up and facilitating these educational workshops in these low literacy communities. And I just think that even having people who are from these communities but not living in them being included in these conversations as well, because I think that although they're not living in these low literacy communities anymore, they still have this input that is valid.
Thank you for that. Since we spoke about policy, we mentioned a couple of times that since the beginning of our exchange, we mentioned Bill C-27, which is really a beginning of regulation of AI in Canada. What else is needed, Valentine, because of your expertise and experience and because you're a lawyer, can you shine some light on precise, concrete things that should be done in addition to Bill C-27?
In addition to Bill C-27, maybe I can just give a brief introduction to C-27 and then look at everything else that will need to be done on top of C-27. The goal, first of all, C-27 applies to commercial activities. So it's important to understand that limit of application of the law. So if someone builds an AI system, develops, designs, manages an AI system, so that could be United for Literacy if you as an organization decide to adopt and manage an AI system, then Bill C-27 would be applicable if there's commercial activities across provinces or internationally. So that's where it applies. And the goal is to modernize our legal framework to support digital economy and digital related transactions and commerce while preventing risk. It's a risk management framework. It's to avoid the worst case scenarios. That's why it was put forth. And, so safeguarding citizens' privacy and human rights and our overall shared values, as well as recognizing principles that are contained in different international agreements that Canada has signed. What it does propose to do is require that any person, any type of industry, business, association adopts measures to mitigate the risks of harm and biased outputs. So this is meant to manage and prevent biased decisions made or biased outputs by generative AI systems like ChatGPT. And that would be done related to high impact AI systems. Now, just this morning, the Minister of Innovation, Science, Economic Development, Minister Champagne, released a letter because the bill is now in committee. So it's past the second reading, it's now in committee, and a number of stakeholders have voiced recommendations on what kind of adjustments to make to the AI and data law, Bill C-27. So what was not defined before, high impact AI system. What is a high impact AI system? It has now been defined. So anything that would have to do with work or access to health, for example, would be a high impact AI system. Then there's a number of public reporting that is made compulsory to what would a person who would be named as an AI commissioner. And then the overall goal is really to prevent any serious harm. Serious harm can include economic loss, for example. So that's the big, really very generalized, short intro to what Bill C-27 is meant to do. We can see, for example, that all concerns related to copyright or data sovereignty are not covered by Bill C-27 right at this point. There probably will be some consultations regarding intellectual property and copyright, which is really important because it's not just Hollywood actors and writers who are content creators. So I put that in the chat a little bit earlier because there were very interesting discussions yesterday at the Federal Trade Commission in the States, where a number of stakeholders were presenting what their concerns were. And they really helped us understand how we all become, as citizens, we become content creators. When we use social media, we create content. we write text, we share images, we share videos. That is called content creation. So even if we're not an artist, the minute we use ChatGPT, we become a content creator. Because when I use DALL-E, if I put my artist hat on and I curate an art exhibit, I am putting images into DALL-E and variations. They keep that data and they can train their data because I'm voluntarily inputting images and text. If I use ChatGPT to summarize a document, it's super useful. It goes really, really fast. You have to double check it. Like Rukia was saying a little bit earlier, you have to double check because it doesn't always summarize. And sometimes it adds words you didn't really put in there and concepts you didn't really want in there. So it's not fully functional yet, but not just that, it's that all that information is going into content that I'm giving to a big tech American company. It's not stimulating Canadian economy necessarily. That is information and valued data that has a monetary value that we're giving to a big tech partner. So the 3 C's that I put in the chat a little bit earlier were from the voice actors representative, and he was saying consent, control, and compensation are the 3 C's, as we all are content creators in the age of generative AI. That is not covered in Bill C-27. The very broader collective impact of bias, for example, I'll speak about gender bias, that I experience on a regular basis when I use DALL-E to generate images. You ask for a CEO, you get white men. And this is part of a video that I put together, but I put a beautiful painting of Michelle Obama, and I asked it for variations. After 3 variations, that beautiful Black woman had blue eyes. After 10 variations, she was white. After 15, she was a white man with blue eyes. Bias is real. That is representation. So if you're in a classroom and you need to teach critical thinking. And honestly, I'm not too sure if it's necessary to be exposed to such racism and sexism. So those are really important questions that I'm not convinced Bill C-27 will address. So copyright, and more broadly, our economic rights.
Thank you, Valentine. To answer your question, no, it is not necessary to be exposed to that. Yes. The 3 C's, that will be a takeaway. We have a lot of questions from the chat, and I really want us to get through it. So I want to thank all of you for your lights, your insights, your sensitivity, and answering the questions. Please stay on, and I will ask the questions, and anyone who wants to answer, please just jump in. So the first question is, could one of you describe large language models?
I was gonna actually suggest that maybe ChatGPT could describe large language models if we still have access to that, because it might have the best understanding out of all of this.
Yeah, Mark, if you're still there, and do you want to put up the screen, the ChatGPT screen, to see? While you set it up, I'm going to go to the next question. How will we deal with students and job applicants using AI and ChatGPT to plagiarize at school and in jobs? AI makes than they have and develop their 6th and 7th senses through natural learning. We have teachers here on the line. I want to hear that answer. Matthew, maybe you want to jump in?
Well, I think we already touched on this. Yuanda and I both addressed this somewhat earlier, but it is something that is absolutely going to have to be integrated into ethics codes and into education. The question is finding a balance. And certainly I've seen, from a lot of the different teachers and the different schools that I've seen that have opinions on this, that have policies on this, there's really a wide range. And it's a little bit similar. It's sort of similar to calculators, but it's also similar to cell phones, where you see a really broad range of of policies around cell phones in schools, and ranging from they're not being allowed at all, which I think is an overreaction, to obviously just not having any policy at all, which I think is an underreaction. So I think what is going to take a while to develop is the right balance, because I don't think we just want to say, no, you can never use AI of any kind. For one thing, when you're using Google, you're using AI. With almost every digital platform that we use to get information has some kind of AI in the broadest sense, and increasingly, that's going to be more and more true, because all of the big tech companies are going heavily into AI. So I think, again, it really is going to vary based on the subject. What matters, I think, more than the specific answer is that there is a policy, that it's a policy that was developed not hastily, that it's a policy that was not developed out of reflex or out of fear, but a policy that really is based on thinking, what is the way we can integrate this technology that will help students without either preventing them from learning what they need to learn, or making it in some ways easier to cheat. Because really the best way of avoiding plagiarism and other forms of cheating is to make it harder to cheat than to not cheat. And a lot of that is going to come into lesson design, as well as designing policy. And the last thing I'll say here is, I think one other good comparison is Wikipedia, where, in the early days when Wikipedia was brought out, teachers in general would say, just don't go to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia in its early days was not very accurate. But over time, Wikipedia has become extremely accurate. It's not perfect, but on average, it's about as accurate as any print encyclopedia. Like any print encyclopedia, you don't want it to be your only source, because it's not a primary source or even a secondary source. It's a synthesis, but it's actually a tremendously powerful tool. And in our material on verification, on finding out what's real online, we actually recommend using Wikipedia, because in many cases it is the best and quickest way to get an answer. But you also need to know how to use it, because every single Wikipedia article has its own rating for accuracy and completeness. It's easy to see. All you have to do is know which link to click, which button to toggle, and you can see how accurate Wikipedia editors think it is. And unlike algorithms, it's radically transparent, because you can see every edit that has ever been made. So if you think someone might have vandalized it recently, you can check to see whether there have been major edits, and you can also see, is this a controversial article? Have there been edits going back and forth? So we actually have a lesson about using Wikipedia that includes recommendations for teachers on what to ask students to do if they want to use Wikipedia in the classroom. And that's what we're going to have to get to with algorithms, is supporting teachers and supporting students in making effective, appropriate, and ethical use of these tools.
Thank you, Matthew. Yuanda, I'm coming to you, but I just want to let everybody know that we do have a large language model definition shared by Valentine, and then we are going to test it with ChatGPT. We're going now. So you see from ChatGPT, we get that large language models are advanced artificial intelligence systems that use deep learning techniques to process and generate human-like text. They possess extensive knowledge and can perform tasks such as language translation, text generation, and answering questions. GPT-3 is an example of a large language model. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Yuanda, you're up.
Thank you. So I just kind of wanted to address this idea around like plagiarism and kind of job applications and essay writing and things like that. And I almost want to reframe the question in a bit of a different way, which is that even the right question? Because I wanted to come back to like, what are we actually interested in people when they write a job application or an assignment, right? And what we're ultimately interested in is their ability to perform a certain type of task. And in the real world, so let's say I had a business and you came to work for my business, what I want to know is not how well you can write on your own without any assistance. When you're actually working at my business, you're going to have the AI. And what I'm interested in is how good is the combination of you and the AI, right? So if that's what we're trying to train people for in the long term, then in the education system, I almost feel that the performance of their ability to use the AI is important as well, right? And so I almost think it's the wrong incentive to do all of the training without the AI. There is the suggestion that Matthew made, which is like with the base level skill, you need to develop some level of competence independently without the AI before you can start to work with the AI. And I definitely think that's true. And I think the way you get around the plagiarism in that aspect really kind of points out some of the weaknesses in our education and evaluation systems that exist in the first place, right? Which is like, why do we evaluate people by having them write an essay? Is that really a good representation of their thinking and writing ability? Why do we evaluate someone's job application by looking at a resume that's a one-pager? Does that really tell us about the person and why we might be interested in hiring them? And so I think in a lot of ways, the paradigm shift may be in the ways that we actually have good evaluations for people, right? So for example, in some of our programs, we're trying to pioneer ways of doing a job interview that are slightly different, where you have an actual interaction with the person, you bring them into a room with you for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you play a game together, you do an activity together. And we suggest that perhaps that's a much more enriched experience you have with the person and helps you understand them a lot better than any one pager that they might possibly write. Matthew, I see you have a response, so.
Just wanted to, I wanted to agree with that strongly. And I wanted to bring that back to the question that came up earlier about, are there ways that AIs can be used to promote social justice and to promote equity? And, you know, it's one of the tokens of privilege in our society is being able to speak and write well. And there are so many things that we are evaluated on, whether in school or in life, that really are a matter of having grown up in a majority language household that had a lot of books. And, you know, that is a lot of the time, that's not actually what we should be evaluating. It's not fair to evaluate people on that. That's not, you know, that's something that is part of it, is a privilege. And it's, you know, in an English class, in a job where writing is part of the job or public speaking is part of the job, sure, those can be legitimate things. But most of the time, when you're writing, when you're in history, when you're in science, when you're in whatever, writing an essay is just one way of showing your knowledge. And the issue there should be the knowledge and the skill, not the writing, because it's not a writing class. And so I do think that there is an opportunity for LLMs, for AI, generative AI like ChatGPT, to be used to narrow that gap, to reduce the value of that privilege. And of course, there are ethical issues there. Anytime we're using a large language model, there are ethical issues that we're going to have to deal with. But I do think it's valuable to look at the ways that this can be used, not just to reinforce our current biases, but to counteract them when we can.
Thank you. I think you're starting a revolution of your own, Yuanda, with the suggestion of reviewing how we evaluate things. I think that is fantastic insights, particularly for educators. So thank you for that. But if we were to take, if you panelists were to share pointers of how to use AI best, Rukia, I'm going to go to you because I think your usage of it is so, well, it's encouraging, number one, and it really does show how AI can be an ally. If you had a pointer to share how to use it, what would it be?
So first I can share one point. Like yesterday I told my manager, like, oh, my next team meeting minutes, you will see improvement. And she said, okay, so I told about ChatGPT. So she told me, she said, I'm very glad you're using that, but please take some notes and learn from ChatGPT, because you cannot always depend on that one. So that's her remarks. I really like it. For me to use ChatGPT, so let's say I write a paragraph, right? And I say, can you please correct for me? And I really impressed. They give me like in a 3 different paragraphs, right? So I said, well, that look much better in a format when I send the email to my team, right? So I feel like that's the useful for ChatGPT. Like if I send email by my own, so I can send like in a 1 paragraph, but now I know like, oh, they can divide it in 3 and make sense. So yeah.
That's a good pointer. Thank you. Ocean, what about you? If you had pointers to share or a takeaway that we should remember, what would it be?
I feel like we should remember that AI is a tool to help us and not a replacement for basic education and knowledge.
The tool, yeah, yes, not a replacement. I love that. So I want to thank all our panelists. You guys were very generous. Valentine, Ocean, Yuanda, Rukia, and Matthew. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I believe everybody's got the links to go to the breakout room. So on my part, I just want to thank the United for Literacy for inviting me to be part of this very insightful and this education that clearly I needed. So AI can be a little bit scary to me. So thank you to the panelists for making it less scary. And I wish everybody good breakout rooms. I'll see you soon.